Another day, another dead AAA live service. Why am I not surprised? This time the form of XDefiant, which launched back in May 21st, 2024, and it'll be sunsetting not even a year after its launch. As you can see right here, the critical reception surrounding the game was fairly meager at launch. It's basically Ubisoft's take on an experience akin to Call of Duty, and it did see good initial results, with XDefiant hitting 1 million unique players within 2.5 hours of launch, and that number eventually did escalate to around 8 million unique players in a week. But unfortunately, the game could not sustain such numbers. While the game did help with early 2024 financial success, this game would eventually become more of a burden for Ubisoft, having to maintain a live service with the lower player retention and the lower player spending that it would eventually suffer. And so on August of 2024, Insider Gamer reported that XDefiant is on borrowed time as player numbers decline rapidly based on what they were told by their sources. So scrolling down, you can see that internally, optimism for the game has shifted primarily due to the game's continuously declining player numbers and lack of player spending. One source told me that the game has been struggling to obtain 20,000 concurrent players across all of its platforms. And even more grim was what another source said, quote, Ubisoft would probably be happy with that number. So 20,000 concurrent players across all platforms is already not a good sign for a free-to-play live service, but things are so bad that this source said that low number that's kind of risky for a live service like this would be better than what the game is actually experiencing currently, suggesting that numbers were actually even worse than the 20,000 concurrent players across all platforms. So declining numbers have created tension and anxiety within the team, with sources who spoke to me believing that more layoffs are only a matter of time. This prediction would indeed become reality, with matters not helped by the fact that apparently XDefiant's development was marred by a toxic work culture, by crunch, and years of delay. And then eventually Ubisoft itself began to admit the reality surrounding this struggling live service, reporting during a financial briefing that XDefiant has fallen behind expectations. But despite the writing being on the wall, Ubisoft continued to insist that the game is absolutely not dying. This was what was posted in a blog post for XDefiant, where they quite literally used the words, the game is absolutely not dying. But Insider Gaming kind of reported the reality of the situation, saying it kind of is dying. Today, the player count is wavering, the sentiment around the game has faded, and viewership on social and streaming platforms is slim to nothing. This was just 2.5 months ago, by the way, on September 18th, 2024, when executive producer on XDefiant, Mark Rubin, insisted that the game was absolutely not dying. A month later, on October 15th, 2024, he doubled down on this insistence, stating, quote, to be crystal clear, there are no plans to shut down after Season 4. I've literally been in meetings as of last week to discuss our Year 2 plans, which was contrary to what Tom Henderson reported on Insider Gaming by saying that XDefiant is on borrowed time. And so he got a lot of flack for reporting on that after Mark insisted that there's going to be no shutdown. But turns out Tom Henderson was 100% on the money. And that finally brings us to December 3rd, 2024, when Tom Henderson could definitively say that Ubisoft's XDefiant will be shutting down in June of 2025. And he specifically called out the way Mark Rubin has been misleading his community into a false sense of security. Sorry to get a little emotional here, but to see good, hardworking people lose their jobs when it could have been avoided is fucking diabolical. Just so you all know, he's lied to you every step of the way, and fuck Ubisoft management for not listening. Referring to Mark Rubin's constant assurances to the community and to the developers that XDefiant would not die, that it had long legs ahead. Now, you know what else is diabolical? Shady third-party entities using your personal information for nefarious purposes. Which brings us to the sponsor of today's video, DeleteMe, a subscription service dedicated to keeping your personal information private and safe. Data brokers are constantly out there trying to profit off of selling your personal data to nefarious actors, so it is more important than ever to be proactive about your digital footprint, and that's where DeleteMe comes in. With this service, in one fell swoop, you can delete your personal information from search results and hundreds of data data broker websites. Everything from your name, age, past and present addresses, photos, email, phone numbers, relatives, social media, occupation, marital status, property value, you name it. Information that could be used in shady ways. I didn't realize just how public my data was until I saw my first report from DeleteMe detailing just how many data broker websites had my personal information. And with politically motivated, threatening online activity peaking during election cycles, and with the volume of personal information that is available online having tripled between 2019 and 2023, and with all that information being available online to be sold for dirt cheap, there is no better time than now to get a service like DeleteMe to do a big sweep. I also have the security of knowing that DeleteMe is constantly active, monitoring sites and removing data as needed, and providing privacy reports every 3 months to keep me in the know about all that stuff. You can even make your own custom requests to have your information removed from specific sources by DeleteMe's experts. So if digital privacy is a top priority for you, you can protect your data with DeleteMe by using my link joindeleteme.com/yong20 and my code yong20 to get 20% off at checkout, with family plans available as well. You can also find all of this in the description and comment section below. All right, so let's dive into the nitty-gritty details of this live service shutdown. Right here is the report from Tom Henderson, who reported from several sources that Ubisoft will be shutting down XDefiant in June of 2025. This is something that employees found out about in an internal all-hands meeting, and apparently this was a decision that was made due to poor player numbers and a lack of player spending, which should surprise no one, as those tend to be the reasons why a company would decide to shut down a live service that they spent hundreds of millions of dollars on. As far as layoffs go, they'll begin in February, and around 277 people are expected to lose their jobs, with 2 Ubisoft studios, Ubisoft San Francisco and Osaka, closing their doors. So yeah, for the developers, this is pretty devastating stuff. And then in terms of what players can expect, Season 3 will be coming out for XDefiant, but it will be the last season for the game, and for the remainder of the game's lifespan up until June of 2025. A skeleton crew will be maintaining the game. The article also details Ubisoft having plans to issue refunds for players who meet specific conditions. Those details I'll share with you when we take a look at Ubisoft's statement on this matter, which you can find on Ubisoft's official website in this blog post titled "Our Message to Players." Here it is detailed that starting December 3rd, 2024, XDefiant will begin its sunsetting process, which means that new downloads, player registrations, and purchases will be closed off entirely. The game will be playable for a while longer, but once we hit June 3rd, 2025, the game servers will shut down and the game will be completely inaccessible. And with the lack of any sort of preservation initiative, this is yet another game that will be lost forever and will disappear from the face of the planet. And then right here we have details on refunds. Those who purchase the Ultimate Founders Pack will be issued a full refund, and then players who have made VC and DLC purchases from November 3rd, 2024 onwards will also be fully refunded. But outside of that, you will not receive refunds. Now, this is not a Concord type of situation where the game shut down just weeks after launch. It is shutting down roughly a year after its release. So it's not surprising that they're not issuing refunds across the board. But for these specific conditions that are met, you will be getting your money back. And this will all happen automatically. You'll have to wait roughly 8 weeks for these refunds to be processed, but you can expect some money back if you happen to buy VC and DLC after November 3rd, and if you happen to get the Ultimate Founders Pack. VC referring to XDefiant's currency here, and DLC referring to stuff like the XDefiant Gold Pack, the Starter Pack, and the Combat Pack. Ubisoft also confirms here that Season 3 will be the final content launch for XDefiant, after which no additional content will be added to the game. And so yeah, this is news that has made quite a few headlines, in large part because of assurances that the game would not be shutting down, and then out of the blue, we learned that the game is in fact shutting down. You can see how much traction the news has gained, millions of views and tens of thousands of interactions surrounding this announcement that really shouldn't shock anyone who's been keeping track of the development surrounding XDefiant. but very contrary to, again, assurances made by Ubisoft and by Mark Rubin. Speaking of Mark, here is his personal statement on all of this. I won't read all of it, but he did express his gratitude towards the development team, and he did talk about how their goal was to try to shake up the genre of first-person shooter by removing skill-based matchmaking and go for a more old-school arcade shooter experience, and how he tried to delve into the high-risk, high-reward realm of free-to-play, but that ultimately didn't pan out because it just wasn't garnering the traction that it needed for it to be able to be maintained in the long term. In the statement, he recognizes all of the developers who he highlights are, each and every one of them, real people with a real life, and he also flaunted some of the successes surrounding the game, especially during the launch period when they broke internal records for the fastest game to surpass 5 million users within Ubisoft, and how they had garnered over 15 million players to play their game. And he also highlighted the importance of maintaining an open, honest communication between developers and players, and how they aimed for a player-first mentality, which are all nice sentiments, but ultimately don't make up for the fact that XDefiant tried to delve into an oversaturated market, one that is dominated by the likes of Call of Duty and Fortnite and you name it, and utterly failed to make a long-term impact, even if the initial results looked good, for it to maintain itself as a free-to-play experience where the only source of income is player spending, recurrent player spending on the micro and macro transactions. With their failure to be able to do that, and with them launching a game that ultimately failed to compete with similar games of the genre, it all resulted in the inevitable downfall of yet another AAA live service that just really couldn't stand out enough from the pack, from the current norms as far as this particular genre of live service is concerned. And that led to a very familiar story and circumstance. We have seen so many live services die just in the last year alone. If you look at the last 5 years, how many live services died due to similar circumstances, it's honestly hard to keep track of them all. And as far as Ubisoft is concerned, you got XDefiant, you got Skull and Bones, which is failing, and you also got the Battle Royale game, Hyperspace, I believe it was called. So time and again, Ubisoft has output failure after failure when it comes to live services. They hit gold with Rainbow Six Siege, and For Honor they've managed to kind of bring back as well, but that aside, it's just been one failed endeavor after another, and it's becoming more and more difficult as the live service market gets more and more oversaturated. So maybe it's time to put the brakes on live services and just ship games whose intention aren't recurrent monetization, but to just provide a memorable interactive experience at a reasonable budget, sold at a reasonable cost, so that profit margins are all across the board reasonable. I think Andy Cortez put it aptly here when highlighting the competition that XDefiant had: Call of Duty Warzone, Fortnite, Counter-Strike, Apex Legends, Overwatch 2, Valorant, its own Rainbow Six Siege, and recently Call of Duty Black Ops 6, which, frickin' broke records for the Call of Duty franchise and for Activision Blizzard, and it was actually a Call of Duty game that was just overwhelmingly well received. So yeah, XDefiant, with the critical reception that it received, and with it not doing anything particularly exceptionally compared to the competition, or doing things better than the competition, or providing something really revolutionary or unique, it was bound to suffer this fate. And it sucks for the developers that they were led astray by leadership that put all of these chips and all of these eggs into a basket that basically had a hole underneath. And so you've got folks like Antonio here, a developer who worked on XDefiant, whose dream was to work with AAA companies like Ubisoft, announcing his departure and suffering the consequences of leadership. I think another reason why this comes as such a surprise is because Ubisoft has had rough live service launches before that they stuck to until they made a recovery. Rainbow Six Siege had an incredibly rough launch, but Ubisoft stuck with it. Same with For Honor, and now they've become really stable as recurrent revenue makers. And so XDefiant not getting a similar treatment must signify that the losses that XDefiant incurred as a free-to-play game that was costly to maintain must have been substantial. Though I'm also surprised that they didn't at least attempt the move of bringing XDefiant to Steam. I think one of their biggest mistakes was keeping XDefiant exclusive to the Ubisoft launcher and not spreading their audience base through the vast community that is Steam. Somebody actually predicted that XDefiant not launching on Steam is going to kill the game. I don't believe it's the sole reason why the game died, but I don't think not launching on Steam helped its fate either. But just in general, it's been a rough year for Ubisoft. Star Wars Outlaws underperformed sales-wise, and it launched in a technically not ideal state, so a lot of fixing is going on for the game right now. Assassin's Creed Shadows was supposed to launch this year, but it got pushed back to beyond 2024. It'll launch in 2025 now. They've got NFT endeavors that are failing. Their stock price is plummeting, and not too long ago, there were reports that things are so bad for Ubisoft that they're considering taking the company private alongside Tencent. So it's just all kinds of disarray at the company right now. I don't know what the future holds for Ubisoft, but right now things are looking pretty bleak, and there's a lot riding on Assassin's Creed Shadows becoming extremely successful financially to keep Ubisoft afloat. But yeah, as I said at the beginning of my video, another day, another dead AAA live service, and the hope is that lessons will be learned from this, that the continuous failures of AAA live services will scare companies away from pursuing an endeavor that is more than likely bound to fail epically at this stage of the live service market saturation, and will actually force them to start thinking like creatives again and pursue projects for the sake of making something that is genuinely about fun and not about systems that can monetize. It's funny how Yves Guillemot, in his memo announcing the XDefiant shutdown, talks about how Ubisoft is a key player in our industry, a creator known for its unique and exceptional video games. And then Marie Sophie, another executive who announced the shutdown of XDefiant, talks about how they want to put the company back on the path of growth, innovation, and creativity, and make sure we can set you up for success when they've consistently been setting developers up for failure due to overpriced trend-chasing pursuits and just a general staleness in the types of games they tend to make. A lot of just the samey stuff. We'll see if history will keep repeating itself or if they'll actually learn from these mistakes this time. But I suppose only time will tell. In the meantime, though, let me know in the comments below what your thoughts and opinions are on the implosion of XDefiant and what your experience has been like with the game if you've played it yourself, and what you think this will mean for the future of Ubisoft. Share your thoughts in the comments below, and to be further updated on all things gaming news, reviews, and discussions, stay tuned right here on Young Yeah. I'll see you guys next time. Young out.